Oi. I mean, for me, it was like landing on the moon, having come first from the United States and then to England. I got educated as a biologist and an anthropologist and got a job as a young wildlife biologist. He was looking for somebody who wanted to go to Norway. What I was going to do was to map where otters were. And so I found a place, and that was here. I went outside on one of the outer islands, actually as part of my job as a biologist, with an old fisherman. It was 14 below zero. And I had, had all this modern sports equipment on, like Gore-Tex jackets and gloves and all these things that are supposed to keep you warm. And I was freezing to death after 4 hours in the boat. So he went into the wheelhouse and he picked up a pair of woolen mittens, fisherman's mittens. And at that time he was about 75. And he took the mittens and he dipped them in the sea. And he said, "Try these." And I thought, "Yo, brother, this guy's crazy. Why is he giving me wet mittens to put on to make me warm?" And the fact of the matter is that by dipping him in the sea temperature is warmer than the air temperature. My hands became just as warm as toast immediately after putting those mittens on. Well, that got me interested in the technology behind the mittens. When you look at strategies doing things in remote communities like here, people have an incredibly intimate knowledge of what's available within the immediate vicinity of where they live. People along the coast always used to use seaweed, and then when commercial fertilizers came on the market, then they couldn't be bothered. I mean, it is a bit of work to use it. Labor-intensive ways of doing things like collecting seaweed, like doing vegetable gardens or farming with a spade instead of a tiller or a tractor. They're all things that were part of the ancient traditions of doing things on small scales. You're using resources within a very limited area, then you're making the most of them. You could read about it in a book, but I don't think you would fully understand it. That's basically why I live here and why we choose to live this lifestyle. It's not because we're fanatics about doing everything the way people did in the past, but it does give you an incredible insight into the way people were thinking in the past. The focus of my research is basically trying to record how people have made everyday objects for use in a self-sufficient pre-industrial society. The goal of this type of project is that, if somebody was interested in doing it in the future, then they could also do it if you record it properly. And to do that, you have to talk to old people, and you usually have to have a certain amount of knowledge about the craft itself. In the course of the work that I've done, I've been speaking to people from literally the entire coast of Norway, and then people from Faroe, and people from Iceland, and people from Shetland, because they have this shared common cultural heritage. This is Helena Christiansen, and she's from southern Norway. She was a fisherman's wife. And this is Paul Wang. I met him in 1992 on the Faroe Islands. He was a sheep farmer, and he knew an awful lot about separating the fibres for different types of uses. Joanne Garrick, she's 102 when I took this picture. Shortly before she died, actually. Granddad was born in 1818 and died in 1911. So she actually learned a lot from him, which is why her memory goes that far back and way beyond just about anybody else. It's quite amazing that, you certainly did have technological advancement from the Middle Ages and right up to the 1800s, which would be the earliest point from which I'm able to glean any kind of information. But it didn't make all that much of a difference. when I was looking at people making hide shoes in the past, I would speak to old people, and they would explain that on a hide like this, a big cowhide, you would divide the skin up into different areas depending on who was going to use them. So you'd have a man's shoes would be taken from up along the middle of the back, because that's where the hide is thickest, and then the women's shoes would be lower down the back, and the children's shoes would be made in the place that was least durable, down along the belly skin, which was really, really thin. When they did actually get a whole skin, people were very, very concerned to make the best use of the best parts of the skin. I learned it from these old women at a place called Silwick on Shetland that actually spent a couple of evenings making these with them. The funny thing was that they would say things like, oh, don't scrape off too much because then the shoes will wear out that much quicker. A modern person would think that we should, get rid of all that fat and all those pieces of stringy stuff, but in their minds, in their way of thinking, that it's just been a waste of energy, and it just made the shoes wear out quicker.